Hello. Sad moments apart.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We will go ahead and get started because it's 11 o'clock here on the East Coast. So thank you for taking time to come and spend with Kathryn and I. For anyone who doesn't know us, Kathryn and I are DBT therapists and trainers. And we're pretty excited about today's open house. So I just want to say, kind of like give yourself a pat on the back for taking time to come out today, because the topic of today's open house, staying sane and cultivating inner peace as a DBT therapist. It's such a mouthful, but it's primarily directed at taking care of yourself as a therapist in the work that you do. And Kathryn and I, before having our webinar, we chat and set up, and we had like a mini therapy session, I would say, and kind of talking about the things that have led us to putting this on. And we know that one of the things that really gets in the way of being able to take care of ourselves in a sustainable way as clinicians is just like, there's so many other things that you could be doing. So I just want to congratulate you guys for taking time out this morning to really put intention into feeling better and creating a better quality of life for yourself and the work that you do as a therapist, because it's incredibly challenging. With that all being said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about trainings that we're offering, but I do just want to let you all know that if you've signed up for the training, you'll receive the replay of this. And in that, we'll have information about a training that Kathryn and I are putting on together. And one of the reasons that we're putting this training on today is because we know that there is a need here, and that there's definitely a gap when it comes to sustainability as a DBT therapist in particular. And so when we made our bigger training, Leveling Up in DBT, this is one of the things that we focus on because it's really important to be able to sustain the work that you're doing and feel really good about it. So if you're looking for more of this and you're looking for where to go with some of the things that we're talking about today, know that you'll be getting information about the training that's coming up just in this April. So if you have questions about that, you can reach out to us and let us know. But for now, I think we'll just start with talking about why we wanted to put this training on today. Kathryn, do you want to just share a little bit about what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think the topic for this webinar kind of came out of a number of different conversations that Shaelene and I have had over the last couple of months, but all of them with a similar theme, which is that actually, like, life is really, really hard. I think it always has been and always will be, but I do feel like there's been a sort of like a weightiness to the last couple of years as we're all in the pandemic and having more separate experiences, but all going through the same sort of like painful time of being a little more isolated and knowing of loved ones who are sick or having lots of limitations that really negatively impact their life. And then we're seeing, just like the compounding of all other problems that like cause us so much pain. I live here in Colorado. I grew up in Louisville, right on the edge of Superior. And for those of you that know, we had huge fires in this area. Or in that area. I don't live in that area right now, but that's where I grew up. And so all my high school and elementary school friends, lots of them lost their homes. It's just like these sorts of stories that you hear. I mean, that's my story, in the last couple of months, but every time I'm in a conversation with someone, I'm hearing another story about some tragedy that occurred in their home or communities. And it has to do with the pandemic. It has to do with shootings. It has to do with changes in climate, like all kinds of things that are just kind of coming at us, or illnesses that are, it's like, it's heavy. It's very heavy. And I feel like day in and day out, things just sort of, we go into therapy sessions and then we hear more of it from our clients too, and the stories that they have to tell in the lives that they're living and the ways that those are impacted by all kinds of problems. And so I think, our hope and providing this webinar is really to have a conversation about like, what is it that sustains us as therapists? Because not only are we helping clients through things that just seem, I mean, I think back to early in my career and the kinds of problems that I dealt with my clients. It's just gotten bigger and more over the years rather than like less and easier. Like, I just think like the kinds of tragedies that occur and the scale of them it just seems to keep growing. And so how do you like create the ability to stay in the work and to not just stay in it like in a like kind of obligatory way, but in a way that really like provides hope and like peace and like some kind of healing presence for clients? It takes a lot to do that. So I think that's like how I would describe how we came to this. Shaelene, did you want to add anything before I say more? But
Just in thinking about, I mean, both Kathryn and I do a lot of supervision and consultation. I have a practice with about 15 clinicians, and we were just this morning, my leadership team meeting, and one of my staff is bringing up the staff are really burnt out. Like everyone's really burnt out, and in ways it's not surprising, but in ways it also, I feel like in talking about burnout, it can feel like this very nebulous, insurmountable task. Like, and in ways, whether we're the one who's experiencing the burnout or we're the one who's trying to guide somebody and support them into getting out of a place of burnout, that in itself can feel really overwhelming. And I noticed the urge many times for my supervisors and even myself at times to kind of just throw things at it, like, well, reduce your caseload or go start doing yoga or, things like this. We're just trying to like do what we can to solve it. But I know in a lot of the conversations that Kathryn and I have had, it comes back to more around like, we have to shift our mindset and how we see work, how we see our lives, how we see our mindfulness practice, how we see burnout, how we see our clients, how we work through very difficult things, because this is life. It reminds me of this talk by David Foster Wallace, where he's giving this example about fish talking, and the fish are kind of like in the water, not realizing that they're in water, and that the goal is to kind of be like, this is water, like this, it's happening. And so whatever it is that's kind of like creeping past our limit or creeping past the line that kind of pushes us into a place of burnout, whether it's work or personal life or, pandemic related things, whatever it is, this is water, this is life, and it's not going anywhere. And so in order to be able to get to the other side or get to whenever our finish line is and feel like, I'm really glad I did things that way, we have to get behind shifting how we experience life and how we experience work and how we just really see things and shape things. And so I think another big thing coming into this conversation was really around just how freaking burnt out everybody is and how we have to find different ways to relate to that.
So one of the things that's been on my mind too is just the reality that I think in the field that we're in as therapists, like we are at high risk, I think, of being very apparently competent. And I don't mean that. I think usually when, at least in my own experience, when I would have heard that word like in supervision or something, or that phrase applied to me, I would think, oh, I'm not doing my job right. I might look the part, but I'm not quite good at it or something. And it's really not what I mean. What I mean here is, I think we're in this role as therapists to help our clients figure out how to live in a very painful world where things are going to hurt them, and are hurting them, already have hurt them, and will continue to in some way or another. And our role is to help them figure out how do they allow themselves to experience the pain of that in an open way that can sort of free them to be able to still live very full lives in the midst of that, accepting that kind of pain and that kind of world that we live in. And I think that in order to do it, there is an aspect of this that as therapists, like we really have to be very well versed in our own grief and how we process the pain of the world that we live in ourselves. And I think it's an area that often gets overlooked in our personal lives. Like we experience stuff and we sort of know what we would tell a client. We think, okay, well, that's enough. Like knowing it kind of gets us through to some degree, but we don't always sort of let down our guards in the same way. I mean, not all therapists, I'm sure there are many who do, but I think it's an area that we're all kind of at risk for, like to kind of go along and look like we're kind of like getting through it just fine and we're keeping the peace and all of that. And yet it's sort of a little, it doesn't go like all the way through the surface and into like the core of our being. And then it weighs on us and it's a burden that ends up becoming, I think it turns into burnout for many people. I think it turns into all kinds of things that get people either like they don't want to do the work anymore, like it's too much, it's too draining and they want to be done, or they're doing it, but it becomes sort of like a very painful experience that actually doesn't feel sustainable in the long run. So what I think where I want to start us in terms of like more experiential stuff today is I have a mindfulness practice that I'd like to lead here. And I want us to all participate in it as much as you are willing to. It's a guided meditation kind of. But what I want you to kind of, throw yourself into it. This is the scale of participation, go with it. Join in, like leave all other things aside in your office space or wherever you are today. But I also want you to be paying attention a little bit, and we'll reflect on this after, like what it's like for you to do it. Because I think this practice, at least for me, when the first time I did it, was really sort of brought or shed some light for myself on the ways in which that I might be sort of apparently competent in my own process of grieving the world, the way that the world is right now and all the pain in it. And how much I might sort of like want to pull back and like, oh, I don't quite want to like let all of that in. So you can just pay attention to that, but for the most part, just join me. This actually is a practice that comes from a book called Active Hope. And I literally just pulled my book mark out and then dropped the book in my lap and lost the page. So give me 1 second.
So for everyone who's preparing, we would just encourage you to turn your notifications off. If your door is not closed and people don't know that you're needing to not be interrupted, to go ahead and get yourself settled in that way. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off as well for that.
So like I said, this book or this practice comes from a book called Active Hope by Joanna Macy and John Stone, sorry. If you ever want to reference it again, and I can send out that reference later. But hopefully you've had a minute to now turn off notifications and other things. And I would just invite everybody to find themselves in a position with their back supported, their body uncrossed, open, comfortable, and relaxed. And the practice is called breathing through. Closing your eyes, focus on your breathing. Don't try to breathe in any special way, slow or long. Just watch the breathing as it happens, in and out. Note the accompanying sensations at the nostrils or in the chest or abdomen. Stay passive and alert, like a cat by a mouse hole. As you watch the breathing, note that it happens by itself, without your will, without your deciding each time to inhale or exhale. It's as though you are being breathed by life. Just as everyone in this webinar, in the city that you are in, on this planet, is being breathed by life, sustained in a vast, living, breathing web. Now visualize your breath as a stream or ribbon of air. See it flow up through your nose, down through your windpipe, and into your lungs. Now take it through the heart. Picture it flowing through your heart and out through an opening there to reconnect with the larger web of life. Let the breath stream as it passes through you and through your heart appear as one loop within that vast web, connecting you with it. Now open your awareness to the suffering in the world. For now, drop all defenses and open to your knowledge of that suffering. Let it come as concretely as you can. Images of your fellow beings in pain and need, in fear and isolation, in prisons, hospitals, tenements, refugee camps. No need to strain for these images. They are present to you by virtue of our inner existence. Relax and just let them surface. The countless hardships of our fellow human beings and of our animal brothers and sisters as well, as they swim the seas and fly the air of this planet. Now breathe in the pain like granules of sand on the stream of air, up through your nose, down through your trachea, lungs, and heart, and out again into the world. You are asked to do nothing for now, but let it pass through your heart. Be sure that stream flows through and out again. Don't hang on to that pain. Surrender it for now to the healing resources of life's vast web. Let all sorrows ripen in me, said the Shantideva, the Buddhist saint. We help them ripen by passing them through our hearts, making good, rich compost out of all that grief, so we can learn from it, enhancing our larger collective knowing. If no images or feelings arise and there's only blankness, gray and numb, breathe that through. The numbness itself is a very real part of our world. And if what surfaces for you is not pain for other beings so much as losses and hurts in your own life, breathe those through too. Your own difficulties are an integral part of the grief of our world and arise with it. Should you fear that with this pain your heart might break, remember that the heart that breaks can hold the whole universe. Your heart is that large. Trust it. Keep breathing. And I would invite you to move a little bit, your attention back into the moment, to the computer, the presence of us in this webinar. I'll ask you, Shaelene, to share too, but I just want to say, even in leading it, every time I do this exercise, I notice myself, there's a little part that's like, it's hard to let go and actually let yourself feel all of what there is to feel. And I think it's, I mean, of course, increases my empathy for clients and the ways, the urge to like try to protect ourselves from pain, even when it's in like ineffective ways and sometimes really problematic ways. It's a valid urge. Like pain is a very real thing that we want to avoid. And I think I notice that every time I do the practice, like it really takes a lot to actually let your whole guard down. Did you want to share any observations?
Yes, and it's relevant to that. I noticed a physical sensation I noticed when you were kind of like guiding us to breathe down through our trachea into our heart. I noticed my stomach, it's like I'm bracing, like I'm just holding. There's nothing going on externally, but like my baseline lately, and I was talking to you about this earlier, is like I'm just bracing and holding and protecting and guarding. And so I noticed that in my stomach and really needing to be intentional about letting that go. But the other two things that stood out, there were three. That was one. The other one was in the beginning, you said to breathe and to let life breathe you as it is for everybody else. And there was a moment in that shifted me to feel just more connected and safer and held, knowing that there's this whole world out there that's bigger than just me. And so that felt like a nice shift. And then I guess as I was processing it, it's hard to be in a mindfulness exercise when I know I'm going to start talking and kind of like bringing teaching points out of it. But the words dialectical failure or dialectical imbalance were coming to mind in the sense of the things I was talking about earlier in terms of burnout and fear and grief. Like you were speaking to some things that, and I can't remember exactly which points they were in the practice, but there were some points that spoke to the light without using those words. It was like, know that your heart is strong enough and that even a broken heart, like that it's very, very strong. And something about like resting in the web, like it can hold. I just kept thinking like, oh, okay, the other side is it can hold you. The other side is like your heart will break, but it is very strong. And I just was thinking about how easy it is, because it is so scary and it is so heavy to get laser focused on the things that are not going right, and how isolated that can make you feel and how alone that can make you feel, and just get really focused on the things that are wrong or the things that could go wrong. And the dialectical imbalance for me comes in there because it's like you're only looking at this one side and forgetting the bigger picture. That's still there. We're just not focused on it when we're really locked into what's going on. And I think burnout can feel like that, like a dialectical imbalance or a lot of fear or a lot of grief. Even it just feels like there's a shift in the weight. So those were the things that I noticed.
Yeah, that makes me think of Cedar Coons is one of my the probably person I've learned most about mindfulness from, and she talks about like the importance of paying attention to your heart beating and the way that like you don't have to tell it to beat and you don't have to like work to make it happen. In rare occasions people need some sort of medical intervention for it, but for the most part our hearts just kind of beat. Our breath just goes, like we sleep through the night and we're totally unaware of anything going on around us, and yet our breath still comes and goes, whether we want to or not. And often I think that like the weight of so many tragedies and griefs that are kind of stacking up for all of us in the world can feel so insurmountable, and like it's such a task to even bring our attention to. And we do have to pay attention to actually what a seemingly small but actually like really profound thing is that we're alive, that actually our breath just keeps going and our hearts are beating as long as they're beating and with very little effort. I think it's like an important thing to balance out.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to I don't know if people want to type in the chat, they're welcome to do so, but what I'd like us to do is like for each person to kind of reflect for a minute on what that practice was like for you. And even maybe in kind of a broader way, like, what is this practice like for you to be able to live in this way, to live in a way that like you keep your heart open to the grief that you experience in your own life, in your communities, in the world around you, and then in the ways that you're connected with your clients. Because I think our main purpose in this webinar is to think about how do we do this better? Because I think it's, honestly, I think we're just sort of facing like things getting worse better rather than better as we move forward in time, and thinking about just problems that we're as human beings facing and the ways that we are going to have to cope with those problems. I think it's going to get harder. And I don't mean that in any sort of doomsday sort of way, but I do think it's important for us as therapists to not be surface level competent in dealing with grief. Like, I want us to actually go deeper and be able to sort of open to that. So you're welcome to share in the chat if you want to. You can also just kind of keep it to yourself, but that's what I want you to reflect on. And what we want to talk about for the rest of our time today is like, what are we doing, that we're in order to work on that. And then also inviting you all to consider how you might sort of reinforce, or I'm looking for a different word here, bolster your practice in mindfulness as a way of getting through this. Because I guess I didn't say that clearly, but like that's really what it is. Like, in my mind, the only thing that carries me through all of that is a repetitive practice, noticing that I'm alive. When I'm breathing in, knowing that I'm breathing in. When I'm breathing out, knowing that I'm breathing out, paying attention to what's happening in this moment. And being able to pay attention on a couple levels, like what's actually happening in my senses right here and now. And then also noticing ways in which I can't always articulate, but my connection to things outside myself, like the whole earth, the whole universe, other beings in places that, people I may never even meet, but noticing my connection there. And those things, I think, come right out of, I think Linehan in DBT like gave us some very specific skills. That was my interest into mindfulness. And I think probably many therapists who do DBT, that might have been your entrance. It's not true for all. A lot of DBT therapists got introduced to mindfulness in other ways and then came across DBT. But I think all of it all comes down to this practice of paying attention in the present moment and noticing that we're alive and that we are here, paying attention to ourselves and that connection to the greater experience of life. So, Shaelene, do you want to talk for a minute about like what your practice looks like, or what you want to, how you sustain that?
It's interesting because, as I'm listening to you talk about it, I think to myself, it's something that sounds so simple, but it's not easy. It's really not easy to have an ongoing mindfulness practice. I don't think. Like, I think of easy in the terms of like, what's my default? And it's not my default to just be mindful. Like, I have to put intention behind that. And I think, what I started talking about at the beginning, this idea of like shifting perspective and mindset, it is very much something that's intentional, because if not, the life is going to just keep on lifing, and it has the propensity to really steamroll us at times because it's just got so much like strength. And so it does require effort to go against the grain and really dedicate yourself to a practice that's ongoing. I think that for me, it's really important to consider the balance of what I know will work and what works for me at that time, and not to have too much expectation around that. Because for a long time, there's a long time where I did have a consistent sitting practice where I would get up every day and I would sit right down. And then there was a lot of time where I was really resistant to sitting down. And so, where's the middle ground in there where I can stay being intentional, because I know I can't just let it go. But I also knew that wasn't working for me at the time. And so my mindfulness practice recently is going out for really long walks, and just being outside in the woods. I just moved, and I kind of like go for walks and get lost. I have to like set a time limit because I'll be out there for a long time. But there's just something about being outside in nature that really, I just feel like resets me on a cellular level. And when I'm practicing mindfulness, that's what I'm looking for, is like this not just cognitive place. And I think it is really easy to stay in mindfulness and still be just in this cognitive space, but not really feel yourself settle in fully. And so my more regular practice has been going on walks. And then my more exciting intermittent practice that I can't do every day is going to concerts. I was just talking to Kathryn about that earlier, that whenever I go see live music, it feels like something that really resets me, and not in a way that it's like, it is an accumulating positive. It is very soothing, but there's something spiritual about it for me that's beyond going to see, like, even I used to talk about this in group all the time when teaching Participate, that I once saw Jay-Z in concert at a stadium in the summertime. This was years ago. And everyone was singing, "If you feel like a pimp, dust your shoulders off." And it was like, felt kind of church-like, because it was thousands of people, and they were moving and singing at the same way in the same time. And I just went to a show this past Thursday, very different from Jay-Z. But it was just like, here are all these people coming from all their different places in life. And even myself going to the show, I had been looking forward to it, but I had to go to New York City for it. And then they were taking forever to come on. And then finally he's there and singing. And it just took me back to a place that did not have time. And everybody there was singing and moving and just experiencing all of that together. And so my more intermittent practice is going to live music shows, because I think there's something really communal and healing about people coming together for the same purpose and really throwing themselves into an experience without worrying what other people are thinking about. So I can't go to concerts every single day. I can't go to live music every single day, but that has been my more exciting practice. But my more daily practice has been these really long walks.
Yeah. I feel like what I have learned over the years is like having like multiple different perspectives on practice, and like weaving in lots of different ways to do it is the key to like make it sustainable. Because I've had a sitting practice I've done for many years now, and it's steady, and I think it fuels all of the other things. Like it allows, when you go to a concert, or for me it's not so much concerts, it's just being out in the wilderness, in the mountains mostly. And when I go there, I feel like without that sitting practice and the like cultivating of my attention to things, it becomes just like another task, like it's just another hike I'm doing or something. But it's through that like constant or chronic, or I don't know what the word is, what's the word, long suffering of like sitting and practicing, bringing my attention in a quiet and patient way that like actually makes those more unique moments, like at a concert or on a hike, climbing a mountain or something. Those are the moments they're like more fruitful, or they're more meaningful, because of that practice of attending and bringing attention over and over and over again to one thing, and not letting distractions kind of take me away. Because I think I just came back from a backcountry cross country ski trip this last weekend, and so many moments on the trip I was just noticing how I think even 4 or 5 years ago, being awake, because we didn't have cell phone service, like, and normally like that would have driven me nuts. And it was just so much easier to like let things go, because I just had this practice of like, oh, notice the pull, like notice the urge to check my phone, or notice this or that, and being able to turn attention and like have that sort of like practice, or that habit overlearned, I think was something that made it a much sweeter experience, like less anxiety ridden than other times have been in my life, where I'm like having to let go of things that I don't want to let go of. I want to be in control of.
It seems like there's something to be said about seeing things or noticing things that are greater than you, like in size or in community. Like you had talked about, or we were talking earlier about the practice of sitting with other people. So I haven't sat for mindfulness by myself. It's been a lot harder. I just find myself more agitated, but knowing that I was sitting today in this practice with other people made it feel different for me. It felt less cognitive. And that might not be everyone's experience, and that's okay, but it seems like paying attention to experiences that tie us to other humans out there in the greater universe is something important to pay attention to when we're looking for things that can support and sustain this idea of inner peace. And then the other thing is just like, you're talking about being away in the mountains and feeling like the urge to get pulled and then coming back. It's like there's something about space, like big space. Like I'm thinking mountains, and then your phone just, I don't know, it feels kind of trivial at that moment. Like I've talked to you about this, Kathryn, when I can be having a pretty, busy day, like most people I'm sure here do. And then I go take my dogs out at night. And right now it's February, it's freezing cold here. And I go take them out at night, and I'm usually rushing, and I try to leave my phone inside. And when I get outside and they're going to the bathroom, I look up and I'm just like, oh, there's this huge sky and stars and space. And I'm like, I don't have this like thought about it, but in reflection, I think to myself, like, what is it that's resetting me there? What is it that's different? And I think just the vast open space reminds me that it's like, oh yeah, I'm just here. Like I'm just this speck on this gigantic rock that's moving through, the universe. And suddenly all of those other things, not to minimize them because they're big, but they just don't feel as urgent or as insurmountable as when they did when I'm, my face in my phone, or when I'm just kind of going through the motions throughout the day. So I just wanted to highlight those things that they feel like key factors.
Yeah. There was a chat that came in a few minutes ago about this, like I think, and this is exactly what I was talking about with that comment about apparent confidence is, so the person had typed it in, thank you for sending that in, but about how it's easy to allow client suffering, like to experience or to be with a client when they're suffering, and to allow yourself to like put your defenses down and listen and be in it with them. But it's different when it becomes a personal thing. And I'd say, like, in my experience, I've had both extremes. Like I remember early in my career, I had fewer personal problems. Like life was just a little easier. I didn't have kids yet.
It's
And
true.
all of the challenges that can come with that when you worry about your children and things like that. And I think I had a lot more capacity, and I wanted everything in my personal life to just be a little bit easier, because like it was sort of all I could handle was whatever was going on with my clients. And then I've noticed at times when I've noticed higher burnout later in my career, it's been in times when my personal life, there's a lot that I'm grieving there. And I'm just like, oh, I just want my clients to be okay, because like I can't handle more of that. But on either end of that, it's like, actually, no, the suffering in the world is the suffering in the world. There is an amount of it that I can't have any control over. I can't make any side of it, whether it's personal or client related or far from me or right in my backyard. Wherever it is, it exists. And I have to find some way to like have peace with it, to like open myself up to experience it in a way that will allow me to then figure out, how do I like take my next step? What am I going to do? What's my next move going to be? How am I going to live in this world where whatever this is the reality, the suffering? And I think it's, I feel like I'm so glad you put that in the chat, because I feel like that's like the heart of what I want to even like, it's not even a topic to talk about with you all here today. Honestly, I feel like it's, I was telling Shaelene at the beginning, like, I don't really feel like there's teaching points. I mean, there are, but really it's like, I want to have a conversation with you all, because I just think we as therapists are in this, and we have to find our way through together. And I will just tell you from a personal experience, some of you, I know your names, some of you that are here today because you were part of, or at some point participated in the Practice Ground, which is the online learning community that I used to help with, that Kelly Kerner ran. And my experience of that was a really transformative one, because I think it took my professional experience into like more of a community experience, where it wasn't just like performance at work and learning the skills that I needed to do at work, but actually feeling like I was with a community of people who actually wanted to live differently, like on an emotional level. And it's like hard to even articulate it, but I feel like that's really the heart of this conversation, is like, I don't want to just, I mean, you all know the DBT skills of mindfulness, I assume. If you don't, there's lots of resources online. We can always point them to you, or point you to them if you need. But I'm assuming most of you know. most of you probably have some experience in practicing mindfulness in one way or other. But what I want us to do together as a community of helpers is to figure out some other way of letting ourselves actually go through this life together, because it's very painful, and it's going to get harder. And my hope is to like open up more of that conversation of how do we like actually open to this and not just have the answers, which I think is like historically what therapists are supposed to do, is have the answers for like how to deal with this pain. But I don't really want the answers. I just want to do it well together. So that was kind of a rambly answer.
No, I think like having the, and even in the, I see the, in the chat, it says, there's a word that stuck out to me. I need to look at how I process suffering and being more present in an integrated sense. And I think that's exactly it. Like not as much as possible, like not putting our life in boxes to where it's like, this is happening here and this is happening here. It's like, this is all happening to us. This is water and we're swimming in it, right? And so if that's the case, we have to figure out a way to relate to it differently. And I think, again, like I just keep coming back to this idea of perspective shift and how we talk about it. And even in hearing Kathryn speak about it, and Kathryn and I've had lots of conversations about this. The word that keeps coming back is being open to it, like being open to the suffering, being open to the grief, being open to the loss, to the stress, like being open to all of that. And that is another, just like, it's a word that keeps coming up as I'm hearing you talk about it, that we need to find ways to be more open to it. I think for myself, even in my practice, I feel myself tensing up. My action urge is not to open up. Why would it be to all of these painful things, right? It's to close down, it's to put walls up, it's to try to protect and get smaller and retract. But what we're talking about here is really finding ways to lean in, but like lean in a way that's very meaningful and intentional. And also as we lean in, allows ourselves to be held and supported by the things that naturally keep us going, like our breath, like our heartbeat, like our community, like our shared experiences of suffering. So yeah, man. And, going into the talk today, I was thinking, just like, what are things that we wanted to say and drive home? And I thought too, I've heard a quote before that says that writers write the books that they need. And like, this couldn't have come at a better time for me. Like Kathryn and I were just talking about our weekends and things that are going on. And I feel it. Like I feel the cellular shift starting to happen where it's like, oh, wait, I need to pay attention to this because this could be troubling if I don't pay attention to it in a few days, in a few weeks, in a few moments. And I think in ways we kind of like create the trainings that we need to hear, the trainings or the talks that we needed to hear at some point in our career. So just noticing that thought coming up too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this chat, there's another comment here about being able to hold it in its entirety without losing our breath. I think that's like exactly what it is. I feel like if any one of you could close your eyes right now and just list off the things that are painful that are happening, that are happening to you, that are happening to people that you love, that are happening to your clients, that are happening to your communities, it could easily take your breath away, like really cause you to sort of like just panic possibly. But I think the gift of mindfulness, I mean, I think in one of the things I had sent out and as we were preparing for this webinar and in the invitation to all of you, is like, I remember when I first started learning DBT, that was the invitation, was just like, go practice mindfulness, like whatever it looks like for you, whether it's, a sitting practice or whether it's going through a skills worksheet or whatever it is, like just go practice and practice and practice and practice. And I remember Marcia telling the story of when she would start, sitting, doing sitting meditation, and she would start to feel kind of like bored, like she didn't really have anything to notice, or nothing to observe, her mind wasn't wandering, like she was just sort of like, why am I doing this? And then the instruction was given to her to just notice that, like to notice the boredom, or to notice the urge to move on or do something else, and let that be the thing that you pay attention to. And I think it seems simple, but it is very hard. It's like, how does one keep their breath when there's so many things that cause pain, and to actually sit and pay attention to them, it is hard. I mean, it is a painful experience. I do want to say a few things about what I've noticed, because I think my practice has changed a lot through the pandemic, not in the content of it, because I have a very pretty stable, like I don't do anything different in my sitting practice each time. It's the same each day. But when I say it's changed a lot, what I mean is the fruit from it, I guess you could call it, like what comes out of it has changed a lot, and it's really brought me a lot more sort of like fortitude than I think I would have had to get through the last couple of years. And so some of the things that I think I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, as Shaelene was talking, is figuring out ways to practice with other people. Because I feel like if you're alone in your practice, it's so easy to, for one, to quit, like just to let it kind of fizzle out. But for two, I think it just doesn't, it's not reflective of like what's actually true. Like when I breathe in and out at my desk right here in this room, I'm not breathing out alone, even though I'm the only one in here. But I don't know that I'm the only, or that I'm not the only one breathing, unless I, bring it into my mind that everyone else on earth is breathing with me, right? And the same is true with your practice. Like when you're paying attention and you notice yourself being alive and you notice that you're breathing, you're not the only one doing it at any given moment. But if you don't keep in mind all those others that are practicing with you, or that are trying to pay attention and trying to stay open and to allow themselves to experience the pain of being alive, it's easy to forget that they're there. And then I think it's hard to just keep going. Like you just get a little more tired and a little less motivated. And so staying with others, and that can be that you practice like regularly, like if you have a meditation group or a sangha or something like that. I do want to invite people to this. I'm going to put in the chat box Cedar Coons and Beth O'Rourke out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. They have a mindfulness sitting practice every Thursday morning that's online, and it's open to anyone and everyone that if you want to join. This is the link to Cedar's website, and all the instructions for how they run it are on there. But it's Thursday mornings at 6 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. Eastern. And it's just a half an hour. They ring the bell to start at 7 a.m. or 7 a.m. my time, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern. But they ring it at the top of the hour. They sit for 20 or 25 minutes in silence, just each person doing their own practice in their own location. And then at the very end, they'll ring the bell and share like a reading, a poem or something like that. But it's a nice way to remember that you're not practicing alone if you don't have a group like that locally that you join with. So I think that's a really nice resource that they've offered to the DBT community in particular. And the other thing that I would say is like finding ways to keep yourself inspired. And this has been one of the ways I think my practice has changed so much in the pandemic is I've had a little bit, it's in some ways more time, in some ways less, but it feels like mostly more time to like read and learn, from other people, mostly through reading or sometimes through books, or not books, podcasts, that kind of thing. But I would encourage people to find things that inspire you, that like keep fueling your practice. So the ones that I want to recommend that are my favorite author is Anthony DeMello, and he's got a number of different books that have these like really short little stories that are like sort of, some of them have almost like a riddle kind of feeling to them, but they're just short stories to pay attention or bring your attention to some mystery of life, like the way in which we all exist. And so they're easy to read, but they just kind of fill your mind throughout the day and allow you to kind of bring your attention over and over and over in the day to like wonder and curiosity, and opening your mind into sort of more awareness of like this mystery that, what the heck are we doing all here? So I would strongly recommend him. Shaelene, did you have any other resources that you wanted to share out?
Nothing in particular. I think the idea of staying inspired, for me, I keep thinking about trying to find experiences that encourage the emotion of awe, like being in the face of wonder. And maybe that connects back to seeing the bigger mountains or the bigger sky or things like that. That those are some examples of them. But I also think that spending time reading, listening to podcasts, particularly because you're listening, especially if they're stories about other people's lives, like that common humanity piece comes in when you realize that there are people out there in the world that you don't know who are struggling with similar things, or who are wishing better for you or praying for you or hoping for you. And so listening to and reading stories about resilience and hope and tragedy, because the cycle always continues, that something very traumatic and tragic will happen, and then the sun will still come up and rise. And I think listening to stories, not necessarily that they all have to be about that, but just like putting your mind in something that's outside of your life and your view, will really help to encourage that. And I think that it's really difficult to experience anxiety and burnout and like all of these heavier feelings when you're in the face of wonder and when you are experiencing feelings of awe. I think just being out in nature does that a lot too. There was a statistics I saw the other day that for every 1% of green space that a person can see, even just outside of their window, there's a 4% decrease in anxiety and mood disorder. There was a woman that did this study on this, and she had gave all of the information for it. But I just thought like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, because that feeling, there's something that shifts and changes. There's another one I heard that I don't remember the exact statistic too, but something about how it takes 3 days out in nature to truly reset your brain's pattern of just kind of like being fired on adrenaline and stress. And so the more that we can engage with things that are bigger than us and we're experiencing things that bring up wonder and curiosity, I think we can get out of this like narrow-minded focus that it's really easy to get locked on when things are really stressful and scary and heavy. It's hard to zoom out and see the big picture. And so I know traveling is a big part of that. And I think like there's always examples of things that are big and grand, like traveling and going to concerts. And then there's things that are just like look outside your window and go outside for a walk, or pop your headphones on and listen to an Audible or a podcast or something like that. The other thing that, maybe wouldn't be considered awe-inspired, but just to encourage yourself to stay in the place of learning, going to trainings, like that's something that's very energizing for me. And I think it's because when we're learning, we're still moving. It's not stagnant. But when we're at this place that's like, okay, now I know this, then there's really nowhere else to go. And so I think, one, not all of the reasons that Kathryn and I like doing trainings is because it puts us in this place of being continuously learning and teaching and sharing and hearing other stories of people. And I know that's one thing that really helps me put fire on the wood. I know that was the metaphor you're using back when we were talking about this talk. It's like, how do we continue to keep that flame of joy and wellness and just like the feeling that comes along with it? How do we keep that alive? And those are some of the things that come to mind for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm gonna say one of the things that I have to do often is express creativity. And I one of the things I want to actually recommend for everybody here, because I'm guessing that many of you, if you're not on a DBT consultation team, that's okay. What I'm going to recommend might be best fitting on a DBT consultation team, but you may be able to do this with other colleagues if you're not part of a team like that. But is to start this conversation with your teammates, like to have conversations about how do we stay sort of like more engaged in the practice of mindfulness outside of just the set of skills that we like teach and do, but like really more like how do we live in this sort of mindful way, and start that conversation with your teammates and think of ways that you might do it together. So what I was about to say is one of the ways that I have seen my practice kind of expanding in my own life in the last couple of years is getting back to more like creative expression that I used to do all the time when I was young and free and had all kinds of time and energy and all of that. But I haven't done as much in the last probably decade or so, as I've been busy with work and mostly like career stuff, and then having, kids, which turns out they take a lot of energy and time. But so I've had like a return to some of that like creative expression lately. So I'm going to share a poem that I wrote. This actually I wrote a while back, but it's one that I've been like, I just return to it often because I feel like it just kind of hits the heart of what I'm, what my mindfulness practice is all about. I wasn't planning to read this one, so I have to flip to it. Give me 1 second. As I say that, it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be, but it will be. Well, maybe it won't be as easy as I think. Oh, here it is. Thank goodness. That would have been really awkward. Okay. So this is when I wrote actually out in the mountains, kind of in more like eastern side of, well, I don't even know how to describe it, kind of like the eastern hills out towards the prairie, but still in the mountains. Okay. Early morning stillness. The cool breeze moves through the vastness of this forest, filling every space between the needles of the pines, slowly working its way inside each hollowed hole to take the breath of life to every termite, every bird, every pebble that will not take it in or utter thanks. Yet thanks are all around. Even the dirt reflects the rays given by the sun, as if to say, I'm glad you came. Revealing its array of colors, every speck a different shade of earth. Together the pinks and reds and tans that seem to call me to this land. The early morning stillness, never truly still. The scurrying and scattering, a testament of that natural order of chaotic beings that periodically forget they are alive. Squirrels screech, birds sing their working songs. Deers crunching every twig as they search for a willing plot of grass to satisfy their deepest hunger. Grass swaying as that sweet breeze delivers a touch of air between each blade. So my hope for all of you and for all of us, myself included, is as you leave here today, I mean, my hope is like this isn't really like a training as much as a conversation, and I hope it just keeps ringing in your ears and in your mind over the next few weeks, and that you'll take it to your teams or, to colleagues or friends, and you'll carry that conversation on, and we'll do the same, and we'll all be, conversing together somewhere in the ethos. And considering how we bring like awareness of just this like sort of, interesting little miracle that here we are, and we all have to do it in a very painful place, like be alive in a very painful place. But to do it with awareness of one another and our connection to one another, and finding ways to express that, because I think like we're just going to need more expression of that, and whether it's creativity and awe and inspiration, but we have to share it with each other because we're in hard times. So that's my hope. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I really can just echo what Kathryn's saying about continuing to carry on the conversation. Like I said at the beginning, it's not, this idea, the word cultivating felt really perfect for this talk, because it's not something, it's this ongoing process. It's an ongoing dance that we're doing, and it's not like a one-stop shop, check off the list. And so we are sending our sentiments to all of you and hoping that the conversation today really just planted some seeds, or maybe sparked some things that had kind of been laying dormant for a while, and that you will go on and share these things with your team, and just keep us in mind when you do those things, because we'll be thinking of all of you too. So keep in touch. Like I said, everyone will get an email. Everyone who signed up, so as long as you signed up, you'll get the email with the recording, and there will be information in there about how to contact Kathryn and myself, how to find us at other trainings. And now that you're on our email list, you'll get emails about any future offerings that we do. So thank you all. We wish you well and take good care.
Thanks for being
Bye.
here. Bye.